The most powerful empire in the world wanted one thing from him: to become one of them. They took him at 13 years old, pulled him from the mountains of Albania, put him in front of a sultan, gave him a new name, a new religion, a new identity. They trained him for 20 years, gave him the best military education that the 15th century had to offer, made him a commander, gave him armies, trusted him with campaigns. And then, on a November night in 1443, he took everything they had taught him, turned it around, and pointed it directly at the empire that built him. For the next 25 years, the Ottoman Empire, the same empire that took Constantinople, that swallowed the Balkans whole, that made every king in Europe wake up sweating, could not take one small mountain territory in Albania. Because of him. You've never heard of him. And that is the most insane part of this entire story. If you make it through this first episode and don't immediately want to watch the rest of the series, I'll be genuinely surprised. Subscribe now, hit the like button, and let's go back to 1405. Because this story starts long before the battles. It starts with a father who had to make the worst decision of his life, and a boy who had no say in any of it. Albania in 1405 was not a country. It was a collection of mountain lordships, small, fiercely independent, carved into terrain so brutal that even the Romans had looked at it and decided some of it wasn't worth the trouble. Each lord ruled his territory with a combination of military force and family loyalty that was the only political currency that worked up here. They fought each other constantly. They allied with each other occasionally. They trusted each other almost never. And watching all of this from the east, growing larger and more organized and more inevitable by the decade, was the Ottoman Empire. George Castrioti was born on January 17, 1405. Youngest son of John Castrioti, lord of a principality between Mat and Dibra in northeastern Albania, a man who had survived in this world by being exactly as flexible as the situation required. Catholic when it suited him. Orthodox when that was smarter. Ottoman vassal when Murad II's armies arrived at his borders and flexibility stopped being optional. John had 4 sons: Stanisha, Ripash, Kostandin, and George, the youngest. And around 1423, the Ottomans came for all of them. Not to kill them. Something in some ways more complete than that. The Devshirm. That's what they called it. A system so coldly efficient that it is difficult to look at directly even 600 years later. The Ottoman Empire took Christian boys from subjugated territories, sometimes the sons of nobles used as political guarantees, sometimes children selected from ordinary families, converted them to Islam, educated them in the imperial system, and trained them as soldiers and administrators. The Janissaries, the elite infantry that were the most feared fighting force in the known world, were built almost entirely from boys taken this way. Some of the most powerful men in Ottoman history began as Christian children removed from their families before they were old enough to fully understand what was happening to them. Barlady, who wrote the first full account of Skanderbeg's life in 1508 and drew on sources who knew him personally, describes John Castrioti's situation with the clarity of a man writing about something that had no good resolution. The Ottomans wanted the sons as guarantees of Albanian loyalty. John could refuse, and watch his principality be absorbed by force. Or he could hand over his boys and trust that the empire would honor its side of an arrangement that the empire had written entirely on its own terms. He handed them over. What choice did I have? Is not a question Barlady records John asking. But it is the question that sits behind every line of his account of that moment. George was somewhere between 13 and 18 years old. He went with his brothers into the Ottoman court. His brothers would not survive it. The name they gave him tells you something important. Skanderbeg, Lord Alexander. As in Alexander the Great, the Macedonian conqueror who had swept from Greece to India and whose name was still, 17 centuries after his death, the shorthand for military genius in this part of the world. The Ottomans didn't give that name to everyone. They gave it to the Albanian boy from the mountains because even in the earliest years of his time at court, something was visible in him that the Sultan's advisors recognized and decided to cultivate rather than suppress. He was converted to Islam, educated in Ottoman administration and culture, and then trained, seriously, rigorously, with the full weight of the best military education the 15th century could offer, as a soldier. He learned everything: cavalry tactics, siege warfare, supply line management, how Ottoman armies moved, how they communicated, how they thought, how they won. He rose through the ranks with a speed that Barlady describes as attracting both admiration and jealousy from men who had been in the system far longer. By his 30s he was a Sabashi, a regional military commander. Then a Sanjak, governor of a district. He led campaigns in Anatolia, in the Balkans. for the Ottoman Empire against Christian armies, with Ottoman soldiers under his command. For 20 years he was, by every external measure, one of them. He served faithfully, wrote Konstantin Mihailovic, a Serbian janissary who knew the Ottoman system from the inside and whose memoirs are one of the period's most reliable accounts. And he was trusted. That trust was about to become the most expensive mistake the Ottoman Empire ever made. Here is the detail that makes everything that follows make sense. While George Castrioti was in the Ottoman court becoming Skanderbeg, while he was learning to fight for the empire, rising through its ranks, earning its trust, his homeland was being systematically absorbed. His father John, the man who had sent his sons away to protect his territory, spent the rest of his life watching that territory shrink. The Ottomans took land, installed administrators, demanded more tribute. The arrangement that was supposed to protect the Castrioti Principality was doing exactly what arrangements made with empires at the height of their power tend to do. It was protecting the empire's interests, not the family's. John died in 1437. The principality passed briefly to a brother, then was absorbed entirely into the Ottoman provincial system. The Castrioti lands, the territory that George had been sent away to protect, were gone. His 3 brothers died in the Ottoman court. The historical sources differ on exactly how. Barlady says poison. Others suggest illness. What the sources agree on is that of the 4 Castrioti sons taken as guarantees, only George survived. The youngest, the one they had given the name of history's greatest conqueror. He was in an Ottoman military camp in the Balkans when he received this information. He had been fighting for the empire that had taken his brothers and his land. He had been faithful. He had been trusted. We don't know exactly what he thought in the days after he processed all of this. No source records his private reaction. What the sources record is what he did next. And what he did next required the kind of patience that is almost impossible to sustain. The patience of a man who has decided to wait for exactly the right moment and is willing to wait as long as it takes. The moment came in November 1443. At a battle near Niš in modern Serbia, the Ottoman army he was serving in suffered a significant defeat against a Hungarian-led crusading force under John Hunyadi. The chaos of a retreating army. Communications breaking down. Commanders trying to reorganize in the dark. Skanderbeg took 300 Albanian cavalry and disappeared into the night. He rode toward Albania, toward a fortress called Kruj, the stronghold of his family's old territory, now held by an Ottoman garrison. And he carried with him something that would open its gates without a fight. A forged letter, written in the Sultan's name, ordering the garrison commander to hand the fortress to Skanderbeg. The garrison commander handed over the fortress. Skanderbeg tore off his Ottoman uniform, declared his return to Christianity, raised the flag of the black double-headed eagle, the symbol of the Castrioti family, over the walls of Kruj, and sent a message to every Albanian lord he knew. It was time. Everything from this point forward is what that moment built toward. 20 years of learning, 20 years of patience, 20 years of becoming exactly the weapon he needed to be. If you want to see what he did with it, subscribe and stay for the next episode. Like the video if this story is already doing what I hoped it would do. Because we are just getting started. Before we get to the battles, and there will be battles, there will be so many battles, it's worth pausing on what 20 years in the Ottoman system had actually produced. Barlady describes Skanderbeg at the moment of his return to Albania with the particular admiration of a biographer who is trying to be accurate and cannot help being odd. Tall. Physically powerful in a way that contemporaries remarked on consistently. A rider of exceptional ability, the kind that the Ottoman cavalry system produced in its best graduates. A swordsman. A tactician. But more than the physical qualities, what 20 years in the Ottoman court had given him was something more valuable than any of those things. He knew how they thought. He knew how Ottoman armies moved. Their supply lines, their communication systems, their tactical preferences, their weaknesses in mountain terrain. He knew which commanders were competent and which were promoted for political reasons. He knew how sieges were organized and where they were vulnerable. He knew, in the most direct and practical sense possible, how to fight the Ottoman Empire, because he had spent 20 years fighting for it. They had built the perfect weapon, and pointed it at themselves. March 2, 1444. 3 months after his return to Albania, Skanderbeg did something that no Albanian lord had managed to do in living memory. Something that the terrain, the culture, the deep and ancient suspicion between rival families, and 2 decades of Ottoman pressure had all conspired to make seem impossible. He got them all in a room. The League of Legia, named for the city on the Albanian coast where it was convened, brought together the major Albanian lords for the first time as a unified military alliance. The Dukagini, the Arianidi, the Muzaka, the Thopia. Families that had been fighting each other for generations, that had different religious affiliations, different political alliances, different ideas about how to handle the Ottoman problem. Skanderbeg stood in front of all of them and made a single argument. Separately, he told them, according to Barlady's account of the meeting, "We are territories. Together we are something the Sultan has not faced before." He was elected Captain General of the Alliance. He was 39 years old. He had been back in Albania for 3 months. He had 1 fortress, 300 cavalry, and the most dangerous military education in the known world. The Ottoman Empire was about to find out what he intended to do with all 3.